The rolling hills of Tennessee are often painted in the soft golden hues of folklore and country ballads, but beneath the thick canopy of the ancient forests and the sprawling, rusted wire fences of its forgotten homesteads, there lies a darker, more visceral truth that the locals prefer to keep buried under layers of silence. There's a specific stretch of land near the Cumberland Plateau, a place where the soil is rich and dark, almost obsidian in color, where the air seems to hang heavier than in the surrounding valleys. For nearly 4 decades, the Miller family lived on a farm that sat at the edge of this quiet, suffocating geography. They were people of few words, hardened by the unrelenting labor of tobacco farming and the isolation that comes with living miles from the nearest paved road. But it was not the isolation that eventually broke them. It was the realization that the farmhouse they called home was not actually their own. Something had arrived there long before their ancestors broke the first sod, and it had no intention of ever leaving. The mystery of the Miller farm is not merely a ghost story to be told around a campfire. It is a documented case of psychological erosion, a slow-motion unraveling of reality that serves as a chilling reminder that some places on this earth simply do not want us there. When the Millers first moved into the farmhouse in the late 1950s, they were struck by the peculiar architecture of the cellar. It was not a standard root cellar. The walls were lined with stones that seemed to have been placed with a mathematical precision that defied the rustic nature of the rest of the dwelling. Elias Miller, the patriarch, often complained that the house felt like a living organism, a beast that breathed through the gaps in the floorboards. During the first winter, the family began to notice the sounds. It started as a rhythmic tapping, a soft, insistent percussion that echoed from beneath the hearth. At first, they dismissed it as the settling of old timber or the activity of burrowing animals, but the rhythm was too intentional. It was the sound of something counting. Sometimes it would stop for days, only to return with a frantic, desperate intensity that made the very plates in the kitchen cabinets rattle against their shelves. The eldest daughter, Sarah, was the first to report the visual anomalies. She would tell her parents that she saw shadows that refused to follow the laws of optics. When the sun dipped behind the western ridge, the shadows inside the house would stretch toward the center of the room, regardless of where the lamps were placed. They were not projections of furniture or people. They were voids, absences of light that seemed to possess a weight of their own. One evening, as the family gathered for a meal, Sarah pointed to the corner of the dining room and asked why the man was standing there holding a bundle of sticks. There was no one there, of course, but the terror in her eyes was so profound that Elias reached for his shotgun, his knuckles white as he scanned the empty space. That night, the temperature in the house dropped so drastically that their breath formed dense plumes of mist, and the tapping beneath the hearth transformed into a low, guttural vibration that seemed to emanate from the very marrow of their bones. The family did not leave. They were bound by the stubbornness of the era and the lack of resources, a trap of their own making that tightened with every passing season. As the years crawled by, the farm began to change in ways that defied agricultural logic. The crops planted in the north field would wither overnight, turning to gray ash despite being watered and tended with religious fervor. The livestock became skittish, refusing to enter the barn, often standing in the middle of the open pasture, staring fixedly at the house for hours at a time, their bodies rigid and their eyes wide with a primal, unadulterated fear. It was as if the animals could see a predator that the human eye was not evolved to perceive. The Millers began to lose time. They would sit down to breakfast and find themselves blinking in the dim light of dusk with no memory of the hours that had vanished into the ether. Their journals from this period are filled with frantic, repetitive entries scribbled in shaky handwriting, describing sensations of being watched by 1,000 eyes hidden within the wallpaper. The psychological toll was mounting, and yet they remained, paralyzed by a strange hypnotic attachment to the property. It was as if the house were feeding on their confusion, growing stronger as they grew weaker. The local community eventually stopped visiting. The few neighbors who did come by to deliver supplies would leave them on the porch, refusing to step over the threshold. They claimed that the air near the front door tasted of ozone and rotting vegetation, a sensory warning that nature itself had flagged this place as forbidden. The silence of the neighbors only exacerbated the isolation, pushing the family further into the clutches of the entity that claimed their homestead. They began to hear voices, not in their ears, but inside their minds, whispering secrets of the land, ancient histories of blood and sacrifice that predated the arrival of any settlers in the region. These voices spoke of a deep subterranean presence, a consciousness that had been imprisoned beneath the earth and was slowly, methodically reclaiming its territory. The Millers were no longer just residents. They were witnesses to a slow-motion invasion. The breaking point arrived on a humid night in July, a night when the stars were obscured by a thick, oppressive fog that rolled off the Cumberland Plateau like a shroud. Elias woke to find his wife standing in the center of the living room, staring at the wall where the shadow man had been seen years before. She was not sleeping. She was vibrating with an energy that felt electric and wrong. When he touched her shoulder, she turned, but her eyes were not her own. They were deep, empty pits reflecting nothing, and she spoke in a language that sounded like grinding stones and rushing water. She told him that the counting had stopped because the transition was complete. She walked toward the cellar door, which had been nailed shut for a decade, and with a strength that was physically impossible for her, she tore the boards away as if they were made of dry parchment. Elias followed her down into the darkness, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. What he saw in that cellar changed the trajectory of his life. The stone walls were no longer just stones. They were pulsating, covered in a bioluminescent slime that seemed to be mapping out the family's own nervous systems. The entity was not a ghost in the traditional sense. It was a parasitic intelligence that had been waiting for a host, a vessel that could carry it back into the world of the living. The Millers fled the house that night, leaving everything behind: their clothes, their family photos, their life savings, and the memories of their existence. They drove until the gas ran out, never looking back, never speaking of what they had seen, never daring to return to the place that had nearly consumed their souls. They settled in a town 3 states away, living under assumed names, forever looking over their shoulders, terrified that the thing from the farm had followed them. The farmhouse itself stands to this day, a rotting monument to a secret that refused to be told. Local explorers who have dared to trespass on the property report the same phenomenon: the rhythmic tapping beneath the floorboards, the shadows that move against the light, and the overwhelming, suffocating sense that they are being weighed and measured by something that has been waiting for a very long time. The history of the Tennessee farm is a testament to the fact that there are boundaries in this world that are not meant to be crossed. We like to think that we own the land, that we can impose our will upon the earth and build our lives wherever we choose. But there are places, ancient, hungry places, that hold a different claim. The Miller family paid the price for that realization, a price that cost them their history and their peace of mind. Their silence was not a choice. It was a survival mechanism, a desperate attempt to sever the connection to a darkness that still lingers in the halls of that abandoned home. If you were to drive past that property today, you might feel a sudden, inexplicable chill, a momentary urge to turn your car around and drive as fast as you can in the opposite direction. That is your instinct, the ancient part of your brain that still remembers the predators that once hunted us in the dark. It is a warning, a biological alarm that goes off when you step into the territory of something that does not belong to this world. Some say the entity is still there, waiting for the next family to arrive, waiting for the next set of lives to harvest. The house is slowly sinking into the earth, the floorboards buckling under the weight of the years, but the presence remains a permanent scar on the landscape of Tennessee. It is a reminder that the shadows have a life of their own, and that sometimes the most terrifying thing about a haunted house is not the ghosts you see, but the ones that you can feel pressing against the back of your mind, waiting for you to acknowledge their existence. The Miller story is just one of many, a fragment of a larger, more terrifying mosaic of the unexplained, that dots the map of the American South. These stories are often dismissed as campfire tales or psychological breakdowns, but the sheer consistency of the experiences suggests something far more profound. There is a pattern to the madness, a recurring architecture of fear that suggests these entities are not random occurrences, but part of a systematic, hidden reality that operates alongside our own. The cellar walls, the rhythmic tapping, the loss of time, these are not just tropes of horror. They are the clinical symptoms of an encounter with the unknown. We are forced to ask ourselves, what else is hiding in plain sight? What other homesteads, what other quiet stretches of forest are merely waiting for the right moment to reveal their true nature? The Millers were lucky to leave with their lives, but they left behind pieces of themselves that they would never recover. The trauma of that house, the memory of the voice that sounded like grinding stones, followed them to their graves. They lived the rest of their days in a state of hypervigilance, always expecting the tapping to start again, always waiting for the shadows to detach themselves from the corners of their rooms. Their story is a warning to anyone who thinks they can conquer the land without consequence. Nature and what lies beneath it is not a passive backdrop to our lives. It is a participant, a silent observer that can, if provoked, become an active aggressor. As we delve deeper into the mysteries of the Miller farm, we realize that the true horror is not the entity itself, but the realization that we are so utterly vulnerable to it. We walk through our lives with the illusion of control, building our houses and planting our gardens, oblivious to the ancient, hungry things that dwell in the cracks of our reality. The Millers were just like us until they weren't. They were a normal family until the farm decided they were the fuel it needed to continue its own existence. The farm continues to pull in the curious, the brave, and the foolish, acting as a siren song for those who seek to prove that the world is a logical, predictable place. But the evidence suggests otherwise. The evidence suggests that there are corners of this earth where logic goes to die, where the laws of physics are merely suggestions, and where a dark, ancient intelligence waits for the chance to step back into the light. This is not just a story of a haunted house. It is a story of the fragile barrier between the known and the unknown, and how easily that barrier can be shattered. The silence of the Millers is the most haunting part of all, because it is the silence of the traumatized, the silence of those who have seen the abyss and realized that the abyss was looking right back at them. They never spoke of it again because there were no words that could adequately describe the terror of that realization. To speak of it would be to bring it back to life, to give it the oxygen it needed to return. So they kept the secret, burying it deep within their own minds, hoping that if they ignored the darkness, it would eventually forget them. But the farm never forgets. The farm is a repository of memories, a vault of stolen lives and broken dreams, and it keeps everything it touches, preserving the fear and the agony as if it were a precious commodity. The story of the Miller farm serves as a bridge, a connection between our mundane, everyday lives and the terrifying possibilities that exist just beyond our perception. It challenges us to look closer at the world around us, to question the nature of the places we call home, and to respect the boundaries that have been set by forces we cannot possibly comprehend. When you think of the Miller family, don't just think of a family that was haunted. Think of a family that was chosen, a family that became the vessel for a mystery that will likely never be solved. And as you go about your life, take a moment to look at the shadows in your own home. Are they just the result of the light, or are they something more? Are they watching, waiting, and counting the seconds until you realize that you are not alone? The mystery of the Tennessee farm is a gateway to a deeper understanding of the darkness that permeates our world, a darkness that is always present, always waiting, and always ready to reclaim the land that we so arrogantly claim as our own. We are merely guests here, temporary residents in a world that belongs to something much older and much more dangerous than we can ever imagine. The Miller farm is a monument to that truth, a silent, decaying reminder that some secrets are meant to be kept and that some doors are meant to stay closed forever. If you found this journey into the dark corners of the Tennessee wilderness as chilling as I did, and if you believe that there are truths in this world that remain hidden, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered, then you need to be part of our community. We are not just telling stories, we are documenting the unexplained. We are mapping the shadows, and we are questioning the reality that everyone else takes for granted. If you want to dive deeper into the mysteries that lie beneath the surface of our world, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't just watch, join the conversation. Leave a comment below with your own experiences or the urban legends that haunt your hometown. Do you believe the Millers were haunted by a ghost, or was it something far more ancient and sinister? Your engagement helps us bring these stories to light, and who knows, maybe your own story will be the next one we explore. Hit the bell icon to stay notified, because the next mystery we uncover might be closer to your own backyard than you think. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and remember, not everything in the dark is waiting to be found. The truth is out there, but sometimes it's better off left in the shadows. We are only just beginning to scratch the surface of the Miller Farm's dark history, and there are many more layers to peel back. If you want to support this channel and ensure that we continue to investigate the most disturbing cases, consider joining our membership. You'll get access to exclusive, uncensored deep dives that go even further into the history of these cursed locations. The path into the darkness is long, but we are walking it together. See you in the next investigation, but the story of the Miller Farm does not end with the departure of the last family member, nor does it vanish into the fog of local memory. There is a secondary layer to this haunting that few researchers have dared to touch, a layer that involves the land itself, the very soil that was turned over by generations of settlers long before the Millers arrived. You see, the geography of this particular region of Tennessee is defined by limestone caves and subterranean rivers that carve labyrinthine paths beneath the surface, creating what geologists call karst topography. These caves are not just geological oddities. In the folklore of the indigenous tribes that once roamed these hills, these openings were considered the mouths of the underworld, places where the veil between our reality and the primordial void was perpetually thin. When the Millers built their farmhouse, they were unknowingly constructing a roof over a gateway, a point of convergence where the energy from those ancient, lightless chambers could rise up through the foundation and seep into the floorboards. This explains the recurring reports of the strange rhythmic vibrations that the family described in their private journals. Not an earthquake, not a heavy truck on the road, but a low-frequency pulse, a heartbeat that seemed to synchronize with the house itself. It was as if the ground was breathing, inhaling the lives of those who dared to dwell upon it. Think about the implications of that. A home that is not merely a structure of wood and stone, but a biological extension of a hungry ancient entity buried deep beneath the silt and clay. This is why the local whispers persist even now, decades later. There are farmers in the neighboring counties who refuse to graze their livestock near the perimeter of the property, claiming that the animals become erratic, refusing to eat and staring fixedly into the dark, tangled thicket that marks the edge of the Miller land. Even the birds seem to avoid the canopy of trees that hang over the old farmhouse, creating a pocket of silence that feels unnatural, heavy, and suffocating. This is a silence that isn't empty. It is a silence that is holding its breath. We have spent time analyzing the geological surveys of the area, and there are anomalies that defy standard explanation. Magnetic readings taken near the site show erratic fluctuations that suggest the presence of dense, metallic, or perhaps non-terrestrial materials embedded deep within the bedrock. Could it be that the Miller Farm sits atop a site of an impact or a burial that predates human history? The sheer weight of the atmosphere in that place, as described by those who have visited in recent years, is enough to cause physical nausea and a profound, unshakable sense of being watched by something that possesses a cold, calculating intelligence. This isn't just about a ghost haunting a family. It is about a location that is inherently hostile to the human experience. As we dig deeper into the archives of the county, we find records of other families who lived on that same plot of land throughout the 19th century. Every single one of them suffered from a bizarre, recurring ailment, a form of lethargy that defied medical treatment, coupled with vivid, shared nightmares of being pulled down into the earth. They didn't leave because of ghosts. They left because they felt their own identities dissolving, as if the land was consuming their memories one by one. This is the dark truth that the Millers stumbled upon. The haunting wasn't an external attack. It was an invitation to merge, to become a part of the soil, to be reclaimed by the dark history of Tennessee. And the tragedy is that once you have been touched by that kind of resonance, you never truly leave. Even years later, in the safety of their suburban homes, the Miller descendants reported hearing the same rhythmic pulse in the walls of their new rooms, a phantom reminder that they were still connected to that cursed ground.